Chapter: The Trial of Solis. Beneath them, the ocean floor unfolded like an otherworldly dreamscape bursting with color and light. Vast clusters of luminescent coral stretched out in every direction, their intricate formations pulsing with hues of violet, emerald, and deep sapphire. Soft tendrils of bioluminescent anemones swayed with the currents, their delicate glow casting shifting patterns across the ruins. Schools of iridescent fish darted between the coral, their scales reflecting the ambient metramite energy like liquid gemstones. Strange, elegant creatures glided through the water, their translucent forms trailing faint streams of light as if painting the sea itself. The glow of metramite veins ran through the ancient stone structures below, weaving seamlessly into the natural beauty of the reef. Towers long claimed by the ocean stood like silent sentinels among the corals, their surfaces entwined with vines of bioluminescent flora. Tiny bursts of golden light flickered from hidden crevices where unseen creatures pulsed softly in the shadows. It was a place untouched by time, a dazzling fusion of nature and the remnants of a lost civilization. Jace let out a low whistle. Now that's a view! If Atlantis is dead, at least it died looking fabulous. Helena nodded, her voice quiet with reverence. Atlantis may be fading, but the metramite isn't. It's seeped into the coral, the water, even the creatures. That's why they glow. It's the same energy that once powered the city, still flowing through everything down here. Miles kept his hands steady on the controls, but even he couldn't help but take in the sight before them. The ocean, once a graveyard of a forgotten empire, was alive with light, color, and movement, a breathtaking contrast to the dying city above. It's strange, Miles murmured. Everything up there is falling apart, but down here, it feels like Atlantis is still breathing. For a moment, everyone fell silent, mesmerized by the breathtaking sight before them, the glowing corals, the shimmering water, and the radiant life thriving beneath the ruins of Atlantis, as if the city's soul still lingered in the depths. Miles broke the silence, his tone curious but gentle. Helena, I've been wondering, Atlantis wasn't just advanced, it was harmonious. How did your people make it all work? The city itself feels like it was alive. Helena tilted her head slightly, her expression thoughtful as she watched the illuminated corals ripple with vibrant hues, their glowing patterns shifting like a living tapestry beneath the water. I was only 2 years old when the first solar flare struck, she began, her voice soft. Half of Atlantis sank that day. I didn't witness it, but my father made sure I knew everything about the city, its values, its design, its soul. He believed it was his duty to preserve our knowledge even as the world crumbled around us. She glanced at Miles, her lips curving into a faint smile. He used to tell me stories about how the city was built, how everything in Atlantis was designed to work in balance. The metramite veins you see outside weren't just power sources. They were lifelines. They purified our water, nourished our crops, and kept the city alive. My father called it the living city. Nothing was wasted. Everything flowed in harmony. Miles nodded, his focus still on navigating but clearly captivated. And your governance? How did you keep that balance? Helena's gaze softened, her tone tinged with reverence. The Council of Elders governed Atlantis. They weren't chosen for wealth or ambition, but for their wisdom and their connection to the earth. My father was one of them, though he always said he was an engineer first and a council member second. Decisions weren't made quickly or carelessly. They would meditate on every issue, debate it for days if needed. Haste, my father said, was the enemy of wisdom. Jace, leaning forward from the back seat, let out a low whistle. Sounds like a slow way to run a city. What if there was an emergency? Helena chuckled softly, glancing over her shoulder at him. Emergencies were different. We had contingency plans and the council trusted our engineers and scholars to act quickly when needed. But for long-term decisions, those took time. My father always said, a hasty decision will carry the seeds of regret. Jace leaned back, shaking his head with a grin. I don't think the world today would have the patience for that. Helena's smile turned bittersweet. No, I suppose not. Atlantis wasn't perfect, but we tried. We believed that every choice had to honor the balance between humanity and the earth. My father taught me that balance wasn't about control. It was about respect. Jace smirked. Yeah, well, in our world, respect for nature means exploiting it first, polluting it second, and then holding a conference about saving it. Miles let out a small chuckle at Jace's remark before his tone grew more serious. Yeah, you're not wrong, he admitted. Then turning back to Helena, his voice grew quieter, more reflective. And the orichalcum core? What role did it play in all of this? Helena's eyes drifted to the horizon, where the faint outline of the temple loomed. The orichalcum core crystal wasn't just a power source, she said softly. It was the city's soul. Its energy didn't just power our homes. It connected everything. The floating gardens, the archives, the irrigation systems, all of it was tied to the chamber. My father called it the anchor of our civilization. He said it reminded us that everything we built relied on harmony, not exploitation. She hesitated, her voice growing quieter. He also told me it was our greatest vulnerability. If the crystal was ever disrupted, the balance would collapse. And that's exactly what happened. The solar flare. It was beyond anything we could prepare for. Half the city sank, and the rest struggled to survive. My father said it wasn't just the flare that destroyed us, it was our hubris. We thought we had forever to preserve the balance, but nature had other plans. Miles tightened his grip on the controls, his expression grim. Your father sounds like he was an incredible man. Helena's lips curved into a faint smile, her gaze distant. He was. He dedicated his life to keeping what remained of Atlantis alive, even after the first collapse. He taught me everything I know about the metromite veins, the council, the chamber. He believed that knowledge was the only way to honor what we'd lost. She hesitated, her voice softer now. His name was Atlas, and my mother was Thalia. Together, they were everything. My father was the chief engineer who held Atlantis together, and my mother was its heart. She taught me about balance, about the beauty of the natural world and our place in it. Miles glanced at her, his tone shifting to something gentler. Atlas and Thalia, he repeated, as though committing the names to memory. Thank you for sharing that, Helena. And thank you, Atlas, he added, his voice firm and reverent, for raising a remarkable daughter. You've done your people proud, sir. Helena blinked, a hint of surprise in her expression before a faint laugh escaped her lips. He would have liked you, Miles. He had a way of respecting everyone, but always with a touch of formality. From the back seat, Jace smirked, leaning forward to rest his elbows on his knees. Helena Atlas has a nice ring to it, he teased. I mean, why settle for just a first name when you've got a whole family legacy to carry around? Helena rolled her eyes, though the faint flush of color on her cheeks betrayed her amusement. Jace, don't make me regret telling you anything. And for the record, it's just Helena. Jace held up his hands in mock surrender, grinning. All right. Just saying, it's a name that commands respect. Maybe I'll start calling you Commander Helena Atlas from now on. Miles shook his head, chuckling softly as he refocused on the glowing ruins ahead. Let's not inflate her ego too much, Jace. We've still got a temple to survive. Helena chuckled, her gaze returning to the window as the sub drew closer to the Temple of Solis. For a moment, the quiet hum of the metromite veins filled the air, and she whispered, almost to herself, Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Mom, for everything. The submersible jolted slightly as it neared the Temple of Solis, the glowing glyphs on its massive entrance coming into view. Miles steadied the controls, his voice steady but tinged with admiration. Thank you for sharing this, Helena. Your people left behind something extraordinary. Let's make sure their legacy isn't forgotten. Helena glanced at him, her expression soft but resolute. That's why I'm here, Miles, to make sure that everything my father fought for, everything Atlantis stood for, lives on, even if it's just in memory. Jace leaned forward, peering at the temple. Well, looks like we're about to honor it the best way we can, by not dying in there. Helena chuckled, her gaze fixed on the glowing ruins. Let's hope we're worthy of the trials ahead. The submersible docked at the Temple of Solis with a faint hiss, the ancient docking platform still functional thanks to the residual power of the metromite veins pulsing beneath the temple. The grand entrance loomed before the team, massive and foreboding. Glyphs etched into its surface shimmered faintly, casting an eerie light on the waterlogged ruins. The team stepped onto the platform cautiously, each movement echoing in the hollow silence. A small drone detached from the submersible, its sleek frame hovering silently before gliding forward into the temple's entrance. Its sensors flickered to life, scanning the ancient structure while transmitting real-time data back to Ina aboard the sphere. A soft hum filled the air as the drone mapped the environment, analyzing the intricate glyphs and the metromite veins embedded in the walls. Streams of data scrolled across its interface, feeding crucial information to their base. Miles watched its progress, knowing that every scan brought them one step closer to understanding the secrets buried within Atlantis. Helena stood before the temple doors, her fingers brushing over the intricate carvings. "This temple isn't just a building," she murmured. "It's a living system. My parents designed its defenses to challenge anyone unworthy of the orichalcum core. These aren't just puzzles, they're trials." Miles nodded grimly, gripping his weapon. "Trials we'll have to survive. Let's move." The massive doors groaned as they opened, revealing a long, dark hallway lined with glowing conduits of metromite. At the end of the corridor, a circular chamber pulsed with energy. As the team stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind them, sealing them in. The chamber was vast, with 3 platforms suspended above a chasm that glowed faintly with metromite energy. Each platform was connected by narrow beams, and towering above them were massive, rotating gears inscribed with glowing Atlantean glyphs. A central console stood on the far side of the chamber, its surface covered in more glyphs and glowing panels. Helena stepped forward, her eyes scanning the room. "This is the first trial. It's a kinetic lock system." Miles frowned. "Kinetic lock?" Helena nodded, pointing to the rotating gears. "The gears control the energy flow to the temple's central core. To unlock the next passage, we have to realign them in the correct sequence." "But it's not that simple." Jace peered into the chasm below. "Let me guess. If we mess up, we fall into that glowing abyss?" "Not just that," Helena replied. "The gears are protected by energy fields, and the beams connecting the platforms will destabilize if we don't maintain balance. One wrong move and the whole system will shut down, and us with it." Miles glanced at her. "All right, how do we start?" Helena moved to the edge of the first platform, pointing to a set of glowing symbols on the nearest gear. "We need to activate the sequence by pressing the correct glyphs on each gear. The sequence is based on Atlantean power cycles, flow, stabilization, and amplification. I'll guide you from here. Miles, you'll need to move across the platforms and activate the glyphs in the right order." Miles sighed, already stepping onto the narrow beam. "Of course I do. The first task: balancing the platforms." As Miles began crossing the beam, the entire chamber shifted. The platforms tilted slightly, forcing him to adjust his balance. "The platforms are pressure sensitive," Helena called out. "Keep your movements steady or they'll destabilize." Jace winced as one of the beams wobbled under Miles's weight. "No pressure, buddy, just don't fall." Miles shot him a glare but pressed on. He reached the first gear and examined the glowing glyphs. "Which one first?" he asked. Helena studied the symbols. "The one representing flow. It's the spiral with the glowing center." Miles pressed the glyph and the gear began to rotate faster, sending sparks of energy through the conduits. The platform beneath him wobbled dangerously. "Now stabilization!" Helena shouted. "It's the interlocking rings, quickly!" Miles activated the second glyph and the gear slowed slightly, the energy stabilizing. The platform leveled out. "All right," Helena called. "Now, amplification, the starburst symbol. Be careful. The energy surge will make the platform unstable again." Miles braced himself and pressed the final glyph. The gear locked into place, sending a surge of energy across the chamber. The platform shook violently, but he managed to keep his footing. "One down," Helena said, relief evident in her voice. "Now to the second gear." The second task: avoiding energy fields. As Miles moved to the next platform, glowing energy fields began to activate between the gears, arcing with crackling electricity. "Helena!" Miles called, dodging an arc of energy. "What's going on?" "The temple's defenses are responding to the energy surge," Helena said, her voice tense. "The fields are random, but they follow the energy flow. Watch the conduits and time your movements." Miles gritted his teeth, watching the glowing lines on the floor. He darted forward just as another arc of energy shot past him, barely missing. When he reached the second gear, Helena quickly directed him. This one is trickier. The sequence is inverted. Amplification first, then stabilization, then flow. Miles activated the glyphs in the order Helena gave, his movements precise despite the increasing instability of the platforms. As the second gear locked into place, a loud rumble echoed through the chamber. "The temple is destabilizing!" Jace shouted, gripping the edge of the platform. Helena shook her head. "It's just the system responding. One more gear and the mechanism will unlock." The final task: a race against time. Miles made his way to the third gear, but the beams connecting the platforms began to flicker and disappear. "Helena!" he called, urgency in his voice. "The temple's defenses are collapsing!" Helena shouted. "You need to move faster!" Miles sprinted across the last beam as it flickered beneath him, reaching the third gear just in time. The glyphs on this gear were unlit and the energy conduits were dark. Helena frowned. "This one requires manual synchronization. You'll need to rotate the gear yourself and align the glyphs to match the flow of the energy conduits." Miles grabbed the edge of the massive gear, straining against its weight. "A little more guidance would be helpful," he grunted. "Rotate it clockwise until the spiral aligns with the central conduit," Helena instructed. "Then reverse it to lock the interlocking rings. Once you see the starburst glow, hold it steady." Miles followed her instructions, sweat dripping down his face as the gear resisted his movements. Finally, the starburst glyph lit up and he locked it into place. The entire chamber lit up with a blinding flash of energy. The three gears rotated in unison and the central mechanism began to descend, revealing a hidden glyph-covered platform beneath it. The walls shook violently and debris started falling from above as the entire system destabilized. As the mechanism lowered, the glyphs on the floor pulsed to life, forming an intricate pattern that stretched across the chamber. The drone hovered over the platform, its sensors capturing the shifting symbols as they realigned, revealing a map-like formation glowing with Metromite energy. Helena's eyes widened as the glyphs converged into a single shape, an unmistakable marker pinpointing a specific location beneath the ruins. The drone's data feed streamed back to the sphere, storing the critical coordinates before the chamber's structure began to collapse. "That's it!" Helena gasped. "The glyphs are showing us where the meteorite core is buried." The temple trembled violently, stone slabs cracking under the immense energy surge. Jace glanced at the crumbling ceiling. "That's great news! Now how about we get out of here before we become part of the ruins?" "The temple's collapsing!" Helena shouted. "We triggered the failsafe!" The team sprinted toward the exit as the chamber crumbled around them. Massive chunks of stone fell from the ceiling and the glowing conduits exploded in bursts of energy. Jace stumbled, barely dodging a falling beam. "I told you this place would kill us!" Miles grabbed his arm, pulling him forward. "Keep running!" They burst through the main doors just as the temple began to sink into the ocean. Diving into the water, they swam to the submersible, gasping for air as they climbed aboard. Helena looked back at the sinking temple, her expression unreadable. "The location of the core is revealed," she said quietly. "But Atlantis doesn't give up its secrets without a price." Miles powered up the sub, steering it toward the compass's new destination. "Then let's make sure we're ready for whatever comes next." As the team climbed into the sub, soaked and gasping for air, the temple behind them finally gave way, collapsing in a cacophony of stone and energy surges. The waters churned with debris, glowing fragments of Metromite illuminating the darkness. Inside the sub, the onboard systems began processing the data from the temple's mechanisms. Aina's calm voice came over the comms. "Data from the temple's collapse is being processed. Drone footage captured the final projection from the trial mechanism. Compiling coordinates now." Miles steadied himself in the pilot's seat, his eyes narrowing as he waited for Aina's update. Helena, still catching her breath, leaned forward, her attention fixed on the interface. Aina continued. "The location of the orichalcum core is confirmed. It lies within the Chamber of the Heart, located beneath the Grand Plaza, Atlantis' central district. The chamber is positioned at the lowest point of the city's foundation, surrounded by layers of collapsed ruins. Passage to the chamber will require navigating through submerged, unstable tunnels." Helena nodded, her voice calm but firm. "The Grand Plaza. It was the heart of Atlantis, the place where everything converged. My parents once told me that the Chamber of the Heart was designed to be impenetrable. It was meant to protect the orichalcum at all costs. If we're going there, we'll need to be prepared. Ana's voice added, "Drone scans indicate structural instability in the central district. Residual energy from the metromite veins suggests the area is still partially active. Potential hazards include collapsing structures, energy surges, and unknown environmental dangers." Jace groaned, slumping back in his seat. Of course it's in the most dangerous place possible. Why couldn't it just be in a nice, quiet garden or something? Miles ignored him, his focus on the map projection that Ana displayed. The glowing path traced a route through the underwater ruins, weaving between collapsed buildings and debris until it reached a massive, glowing chamber buried deep beneath the city. Helena studied the projection, her brow furrowed. The Grand Plaza has been underwater for centuries. The ruins above it are unstable, and the tunnels leading to the Chamber of the Heart are likely flooded and overgrown, but... She paused, her gaze sharpening. If we follow the metromite veins, they'll guide us. The veins were designed to lead energy directly to the core. Miles tightened his grip on the controls. Then that's our path. Ana, keep scanning for structural weaknesses and potential threats. Let us know if anything looks too unstable. Ina replied, "Understood. Drone support will remain active during navigation. I will provide updates in real time." As the sub moved forward, the glowing map on the screen served as their guide, its path winding deeper into the ruins. Miles glanced at Helena, his voice steady. "We've come this far. No turning back now." Helena nodded, her voice resolute. "The Chamber of the Heart holds the key to everything. If we want to save your world and honor what's left of mine, we can't fail." The sub powered on, diving deeper into the ancient city, the glow of the metromite veins lighting the way toward their final challenge.